Please be seated. The court is now in session. In today's hearing, the chamber will hear the testimony of Mr. Pichum. Ms. Chia Thi Hong, please report to the chamber the attendance of the parties to the proceedings. Greffier. Mr. President, for today's hearing, I note that all parties to the proceeding are present, except Mr. Sun Arun, National Defense Counsel for Mr. Nguyen Chie, is absent due to his health reason. And Mr. Nguyen Chie is present in the holding cell downstairs, and he has waived his right to attend directly in this courtroom. And the waiver of Mr. Nguyen Chie has already been sent to the greffier. The witness who is brought before the chamber today is Mr. Pichum. Mr. Wung Sawan, the duty counsel, is also present in this courtroom. Thank you, Mr. President. The President, thank you, Mr. Siu Hong. Now, the chamber rules on the request by Mr. Nguyen Chie. The chamber is seized of the request on waiver of Mr. Nguyen Chie dated the 23rd of April 2015, certifying that due to his health reason, he cannot concentrate and he wants to be able to attend the future hearing, so he waives his right to be present in the courtroom on the 23rd of April 2015. And his defense counsel has already advised him of the impacts of this waiver, and that does not amount to the waiver of the right to present in this courtroom, and it does not affect his right to participate in the fair trial due to the health condition certified by the doctors attended to him dated the 23rd of April 2015. It notes that the health condition of Nguyen Chie, he has chronic back pain, and he have the pain when he sit for a long time. For that reason, the chamber allows Nguyen Chie to follow the proceeding in the holding cell downstairs. And according to Rule 81(5) of the ECCC, the chamber grants leave for Mr. Nguyen Chie to follow the proceeding by remote means from the holding cell downstairs through audio-visual equipment for the entire proceedings today. The audio-visual officials are instructed to connect for Mr. Nguyen Chie so that he can follow the proceeding remotely from the holding cell downstairs during the entire proceeding today. Next, the chamber hand over the floor to the lead co-lawyer for the civil party to put the question to the witness in question. You may proceed.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll give the floor to my colleague, and then afterwards I will ask a few questions.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, Mr. President, Your Honors, and everyone in and around the courtroom. And good morning, Mr. Witness. My name is Sun Sawan. I am a lawyer for civil parties in case 002. You have so far answered questions by the co-prosecutors in relation to Trump Cooperative and Krang Tachan. You are one of the most important witnesses in order to find justice for the victims as well as the suspects, says the counsel. And for that, I seek your further cooperation on this matter. My first topic that I would like to get clarification from you is in relation to forced marriage during the regime. In your capacity as the Secretary of District 105, were you aware of the marriage regulations? Witness, I'd like to respond to your question in relation to the marriage regulations. Yes, indeed. I knew about the regulations, although it did not exist in the form of articles and law. It existed in the form of a common practice from the upper to the lower level, and we simply followed the practice, and I mentioned that at length yesterday. Thank you. Question: who or at what level such marriage principles were created and disseminated to the lower level for implementation? President interrupts. Mr. Pitcham, please wait until the microphone is operational so that your voice will go through the interpretation system. And please only respond when you see the red light on the tip of the microphone. Witness. In fact, on the practice or on the regulations of the marriage, we discuss amongst ourselves at the districts under the guidelines from the zone. And from my observation, there were some gaps in the practice because not everyone consented to the marriage, and as I knew, we were so busy at the district level, and sometimes we gave such authority to the unit chiefs. And as a result, for those couples who consented to the marriage, they were happily living together, but for the others, they did not. Counsel, thank you. Could you further tell the Chamber about the marriage principles that was practiced? Was it commonly practiced throughout the country? Answer: I do not know whether it was a practice nationwide. I only knew about the practice in the southwest zone. Even within the zone, I did not know whether in other sectors, for example, 33 or 35, the common practice was used or not. Counsel, thank you. You just mentioned that some couples consented to their marriage while others did not, and eventually they got a divorce. Can you tell the Chamber clearly as to the consensual marriage between the couples? Did such an event take place during 1972 or 73, or which year did it happen exactly? Answer: in fact, it mostly happened in 1975 wars raged on in 1971 or 72, and there was only a handful of marriages during those years. Because when a wedding was held, the music was played, and it could mentally affect those who were busy themselves in the front battlefield. So usually the marriage ceremony at that time was done secretly. I refer to the period of 71 to 73. However, it became more widespread and opened after the country was liberated nationwide in 1975. And by that time, both the female and the male couples were mature enough. So the regulations seems to relaxed a little bit as more weddings were organized. For example, sometimes a group or two groups of youths were organized for a wedding ceremony so that it could proceed more quickly. And that happened in a rather large scale at that time. Although there was no clear or precise instructions from the upper level, it happened in a form of a family-to-family relationship. And we also just tried to follow the tradition that the couples should get married first before they consummate, so that they would be recognized legally by their neighbors. Council, thank you. You said that in 1975 such wedding ceremonies were relaxed and it was held at a large scale. Can you further expand on that point? Answer. When I said it was relaxed, it means that usually the proposals would be approved and not rejected. And that was relaxed in that sense. So usually we would approve any proposals so that the unit and the commune chiefs could further act it upon the request. Council, thank you. And you just said that those couples, they consented to the marriage. Were all of them consented, or were some of them forced to marry? Answer. I did not have a full understanding on this matter, but I believe both sides were asked about the marriage before they were actually married. The negative point was that on the letter we were told that both sides agreed or consented to the marriage and that it would take place about a week after. And we were told that the commune chief already inquired from both sides about their intention to get married. And when they pass on that information to the district or to Angka, we would further inquire from the intended couples whether they were consented to the marriage. And as I said, only a small number of them were unclear whether they wanted to get married. And in that sense, it could be inferred that they were forced to get married. Secondly, the wedding ceremony was the responsibility of the commune level, And sometimes about 10 couples were organized for an event. At that time, the commune chief was a female by the name of Mai, and she was in charge of organizing such wedding ceremonies. So usually the wedding ceremonies would be organized at a commune, although the couples could be coming from other 10 or 12 communes. And in that sense, I said that the wedding ceremonies were held at a large scale. For example, 10 or 12 couples from each commune. So the total number of the couples could be into 100 from the 10 or the 12 communes. And that commune chief was the one who organized such ceremonies. Council, thank you. So every marriage, through your personal observation, was that you instructed the unit chief to inquire from the youth whether they consented to the marriage. And what about the parents of those people? Were you aware that the parents also consented to the proposed marriage? Answer. I also took part in the inquiry. I made a further inquiry with those people as I did not believe everything. And when I asked them, they replied that they consented to the proposed marriage, and none of them ever said that he or she disagreed or not consented to the marriage. So, in my mind, I would say some of them were afraid, although they might hesitate to tell me the truth. And through my observation, sometimes I would postpone that couple marriage. And sometimes marriage ceremonies took place in other offices near the forest or at far away from where I lived, so I could not have a full understanding about that. Because they were not close to where I could observe, and there was a chief there, so only the chief there would understand about that event. Council, thank you. And let me ask you whether the wedding ceremony was organized according to the Cambodian tradition. For example, there was a sermon by a monk, and then there was a traditional hair cutting ceremony, for instance. Answer, no. At that time, there was no band, so no music. There was a section where they were asked to pray for the dead souls. And then the couple would be requested to present themselves, one couple after another, and then they would say whether they agreed to take their partner as a life partner. They consented to the marriage, And once they did so, then they will be allowed to sit, and then the next couple would present themselves, and the same procedure followed. So usually they would speak out their mind, and then the same process would follow until the last couple. And when the wedding ceremony concluded, then the organizer would wish the newlywed couples and the attendants all the best. And finally, there would be a dining reception, but depending on what we could afford. There could be cooked rice with dessert. Counsel, thank you. Can you tell the court at when such ceremonies were organized? I mean, whether they were organized during the daytime or during the nighttime? Answer. The ceremonies were organized during the daytime, and usually it would conclude at about 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening. Counsel, thank you. Question. So after the conclusion of the ceremony, where did the couple go? Was there a house for each couple to go to? Answer. If they had their relatives or parents living nearby, then they would be allowed to go there to stay. And they would be allowed to rest for a while, I mean not to go to work. And the period varied from 7 days to a fortnight. And that was at the discretion of the unit chief. Counsel, thank you. Did you observe or did you know from hearing other people that the militia would eavesdrop at night time on those newlywed couples? Answer. I did not know for sure about that. Only later on, I only heard through other people that the militia did eavesdrop on those people. But through my understanding, it did not happen. And the fact is that the female unit chief was considered as the mother of those women, and she would want to know whether the unit members, that is those married women, consented to consummate their wedding. So usually the female unit chief would do that with their unit members, as usually the married women were assigned rooms or houses to stay. Counsel, thank you. And through your observation, and if some newly married couple did not agree to consummate their marriage, what would be the sanction? Answer. No, I was not aware of that. Counsel, thank you. You just told the chamber that after the marriage they could live together as a husband and wife for a period between 7 days to fortnights, then they would go separately to their respective unit. And how long after were they allowed to reunite? And how long would they be able to allow to stay together after that initial period? Answer. After they got married, they would be allowed to rest to stay together for between a week to 2 weeks. And their next reunion would be varied. For example, if their husbands were soldiers, they would return to their base, for instance, to the battlefield at the border. And only when they could, they would seek authorization to return to meet with their respective wives, maybe for a week or for 10 days, and they will be authorized to do so. And besides that, they would communicate amongst themselves through letters. Counsel, thank you. So what you said is something that happened within your region, and it's not nationwide. Am I correct in saying so? Answer, yes. I can only say about the people or about the families in my area. Counsel, thank you. Did you ever observe through those mass or multi-couple marriage about the impression of their parents? Were the parents or the people satisfied with such a wedding organization by Angka? Answer, I'd like to give you 2 points. And first, it's my personal view as a human being. Of course, whether they were satisfied or not, I believe some of them would be upset. For example, if I did not attend my child's wedding, then I would feel upset. Second point, from the figure, I learned some of them did feel upset. And because many females or many women were organized to marriage at the same time, and as Khom was the chief, some said they were organized by chief, and others would say that why you felt disappointed because the wedding was organized by Angka. Counsel, what about the personal view of the men or the women who were organized to get married? Would they be able to express their personal opinions against the will of Angka at the time? Answer, nobody protested, but sometimes they they made their feeling to other people know at their respective units. For example, one would say he or she did not like their partners. However, there were only a few cases of that, and as a result, later on, they got divorced. And sometimes they would be advised not to get divorced, and that's how it happened.
Council, Mr. President, I have no further questions, and I would like to ask to cede the floor to my colleague. Mr. President, thank you. You may proceed.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Bonjour.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, witness. My name is Marie Giraud. I am lawyer for the Consolidated Group of Civil Parties participating in this trial. I have a few questions to put to you today regarding life in the cooperatives, living conditions in cooperatives in Tram Kok district. Over the past 2 days, you've explained to us what your duties and responsibilities in Tram Kok were and the manner in which you supervised arrivals of persons, that is 17 April people, and handling issues regarding food and housing. I'll put a few questions to you in relation to your duties and responsibilities at the time. The first question I would like to put to you is as follows. Can you explain to us how and who decided in Tram Kok district to establish work units in the cooperatives? As a matter of fact, we've heard several testimonies since the beginning of this trial which have enabled us to understand that there were units of women, units of children, mobiles and specialized units. I would like to know how those units were established at Tram Kok.
Mr. President, for the cooperative work in Tram Kok, Tamok was the one who designated the task to us. He led the work directly. But as for the commune or the district, for instance, the district under me, we did not know what cooperative was all about. We only understood the task that were assigned to. We had to prepare, for example, communal dining hall. We have only one, kitchen for one village, so we had to follow that order.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you, says counsel.
Later, Tamok further said that we should have only one dining hall for one commune. In other words, we would have only one kitchen in the commune, but it was not possible at that time. So at that time, they selected a model commune. If one commune could have one common dining hall, then that would become a model commune, and others would have one or two different dining halls there. So we had to endeavor to achieve that. People would argue with this, but it was the order from Onka. That's why people had to follow. So the order came from the upper authority, and we had no choice but to do it. So we had to prepare food and they made it clear that if we had one common dining hall, it saved a lot of time, and other peoples would be doing other things other than preparing food. So only a few people would be the cook, and the rest would go to work. And as for the work, I meant the constructions of dike, dam, or in the rice field. And as for the organization of the unit, at that time there were children, so there were children group, there was youth group, and youth group led the children group. They led the children to work, and they also showed them the good path in their life. And as for female youth, they had one unit. As for the adult women, they would be under the district control. As for the adult mobile, the men mobile unit, they had to go to the rice field, and they had to do the farming. So for the adult, the district would gather them to work in the fields or to build dike. For farming, we planted potatoes, and we also transplanting rice. We did it 2 times per year. We were trying to achieve 3 tons per hectare, and over 250,000 hectares, and we had to try to accomplish 3 tons per hectare. Aside from that agricultural land, we were asked to try to plant other crops such as potatoes and other crops in order to feed the member of the cooperatives. In Sector 25, for example, they could not do any farming, and then we had to provide them the crops, potatoes and other stuff. Whenever they came to ask for something, we also provided them seed as well as the crops for them, 1 or 2 trucks at a time when they requested to us. In the district I governed, they had rice, and then sometimes they had cruel as well. But as we could harvest more crops, then all of them had rice, not cruel. So we had to divide them into different units: children unit, young adult unit, and production unit. And as for the commune, they had the task to do it. At that time, wherever there was water, we could do the farming. But in my district, of course, the discipline was rather stringent. But in terms of torturing other people or so, there was no such things in the district I governed.
Je vous remercie. Quand vous...
Thank you. When you say that discipline was very strict, what do you mean?
Strict, by being strict, I meant that they had to do it. They could not be, free, because we were, in this cooperative, we had to work together in order to produce something. That's why they could not be relaxed. They had to join force to do it.
Je Je vous remercie. Vous avez indiqué tout à l'heure.
Thank you. A while ago, you made mention of the presence of youth units and units of children in the district. The establishment of this unit, was it ordered by TAMOC? What instructions did you receive in order that such units be established?
The reason for the establishment of the various units was to take firm control of the forces. We had to know who were the children, who were the young adults or women in the cooperatives. We had to have the control of the workforce we have, whether or not they were sick, whether there were people who were lazy. So we had to take control of that. How many people went to the field, how many people stayed behind at home, we had to have that information. And as the leaders, we had to have that information. For example, there were 200 people and only 50 people went to work, then they had to have this kind of report at hand. Otherwise, they would go and ask the unit chief the reason why people did not go to work. So without the unit chief, how could we know that information? How could we take grasp of the information? So the unit chief for children, women, and men, we had to have the control. We had to have the control of the workforce, so that whenever we assign tasks to them, it was done expeditiously.
Je vous remercie. Vous nous avez indiqué qu'il est...
You stated that it was important for you to know who was lazy. Can you explain to us what happened to people who are considered as being lazy?
Those who were lazy, we would discipline them. We did not take hard measure against them. Some of them were sick. That was the practical case. If they were sick, they could not go to work. That was it. But we had to have that information. But there were instances when the unit chief were too loose in their leadership. Then we had to know that. So we had to sometimes ask the deputy unit chief, and sometimes there were also conflicts among the unit management. Sometimes we had to go and find out directly from each unit if it was in line with what the unit chief reported. It would be good, but otherwise we would have to convene them for discipline, and we gave them advice and to diffuse conflict if there were. But there was no instant when we frightened them, those who actually were found lazy.
Je vous remercie. Vous parlez de mesures disciplinaires.
Regarding disciplinary measures applicable to lazy persons, can you give us examples of disciplinary measures that were applied? And what happened to persons who were arrested for being, in quotes, lazy?
I
am talking about the overall management within the district level. There was no arrest. I did not authorize any arrest. the hardest discipline was to bring that person to meet directly, because the upper level, I mean, we had more experience, we understand the plan, and we could see from the top, and then we would find out the shortcoming at the lower level. So we would guide them and advise them directly what was the mistake and what should be done in order to improve the performance. That was it, and then we would let them go back. And if we found that there was conflict within each unit, then we would advise them, or sometimes we designated that person to a different unit. And we also went to observe directly from the unit, and we had to understand what was really happening over there. Sometimes we heard the report, we did not believe it, then we had to go. That was the experience of the leadership. We had to go and find out what happened on the ground.
Thank you. You have stated that sometimes you went to the units to see for yourself what was the situation. Were working conditions in those units, to your mind, appropriate, or you had the impression that the workload was very, very significant for various units? Can you describe to us what these working conditions in the units were as you saw them?
ខ្ញុំជម្រាបពិសោធន៍បើមានរឿងអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំចុះពិនិត្យអញ្ចឹងយកមេកង់អត់នៅទេមេកង់ធ្វើការអស់ខ្ញុំដល់ទីនោះឈៀងចូលបន្តិចទៅជួបម្នាក់ពីរខ្ញុំស្រង់សម្ដីម្នាក់ពីរសួររឿងហ្នឹងអានេះមិននោះមិន
I would go to the unit myself, but at that time the unit chief were not there. He had gone to work already. Then I would go and ask people, one or two people over there, in order to get the real information from there. And then I verify that answer with the report. And then if it was consistent, I would not put the blame on the unit chief. But if not, then I would convene the unit chief to advise. So if you, for example, if the unit chief were sick or so, somebody would have to take the responsibility. And
Merci, Monsieur le témoin. Mais sur les conditions.
Thank you, witness. Regarding working conditions, for instance, the working hours assigned to different members of the units with a view to achieving the objectives that you were tasked with guaranteeing. Did you have the impression that people worked too much or didn't work hard enough? Were the working conditions, to your mind, appropriate?
I was about to answer that question concerning the working condition. Actually, the work output was quite similar. Of course, there were certain shortcomings in certain units. That was natural. That was not unusual. Certain units were very active, productive, but others were not. And when we went there, we would observe that. Certain people could carry a bag of rice, for example, the other could not. Others could not even carry half of the rice sack, for example. That was not uncommon. And then when I witnessed that, I only gave the general advice to them that we had to help one another. That was my approach. At that time, generally, people would say that they agreed. At that time, the unit chief would call me uncle because I was older, and they would agree with me whenever I gave them advice on helping each other. That was it. And as for the work output, more or less, we had to see the food regime we provide to each unit, the place where they stayed, the medical care or medicine to be provided to that unit, and certain units we had to build accommodation huts for them. For the newcomers, when they did not have any hammock, we had to build huts for them, for example. So these were the things that we did at that time in order to improve their performance.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le témoin. Nous avons entendu.
Thank you, witness. We have heard several witnesses and civil parties, particularly 2 civil parties worked in children's units in Tramcock district, and they explained to us that the working conditions were particularly difficult because they were aged only 8 or 9 at the time. While you were at Tramcock, did you have the opportunity to visit children's units, and can you tell us whether working conditions in those units appear to be acceptable to you?
There were many places, and I did not recall whether I had visited the unit chief, the unit, children unit. I did not actually visit the unit chief. Unit, I only met with the unit chief. And as for the work condition for children, they did not have to do hard work or hard labor at that time. All they did was to collect the bush, certain kinds of bushes in order to produce into organic fertilizers at that time. I only advised the unit chief when I met him that he had to teach children how to do it.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le témoin. Je voudrais vous faire réagir à...
Thank you, witness. I would like you to react to the testimony of a civil party who testified shortly before the Khmer New Year. That person had been a children's work unit in Labour Commune in Tramcock district. That person is called Vanak, and that person stated during his testimony before the chamber in E1/288.1 at about 13 hours 44, and I'll read out to you what that person stated, witness. At the time of the events, we were asked to transport earth from 6 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. at midday. If we did not succeed to achieve the objectives assigned to us, we were deprived of food. A group of 10 children had to transport 10 cubic meters. At times we achieved that objective, and at times we didn't. If the earth was loose, we would work from morning to evening. And in that case, we would succeed to meet the quotas. And if the earth was hard, we didn't succeed and we were deprived of gruel. I would like you to react, Mr. Witness, to this statement, because we've heard many civil parties and witnesses explain that working conditions were sometimes very difficult. Is this something that you were able to observe yourself when you were in Tramcock?
I never encountered. I am not trying to make an excuse, but I never encountered that. they did not have to work until 10 or 11 in the morning before they had their breakfast. Actually, they had their breakfast early in the morning. But I also admit that there were certain shortcomings in the management. It was not uncommon. For example, the chief of children unit, he did not have enough experience. Then when he could not lead it very well, he would report it to his supervisor. And if he failed to report, that was his mistake. Then because people at the top would believe that things went as normal. When it comes to the children unit, there were two tasks assigned to them. One is to collect fertilizer. The other one was to collect the saw wood. And then they also produce some kind of chalk in order to write. Sometimes the unit chief wanted the praise for himself, and he reported incorrectly. But if we learn the shortcomings, we would go and address the issue. But no matter how hard we had to work, but there were shortcomings that we could not avoid.
La nourriture.
Did the food seem adequate to you in order to feed the workers in Tram Kok district?
Don't know.
The food ration was there, although it may not be for them to eat through their own content. I said so because they ate the gruel. And there was also potato, and sometimes they cooked it and gave it to people. I refer to the children who ate potatoes. Although it did not happen everywhere, and some communes were instructed by the district to distribute the potatoes to the children, and that would be in a supplement to the rice that was given to the people in the communes. And sometimes we were busy in distributing food and produce to various communes, and we ourselves did not have rice to eat.
Thank you. You said on the first day when you testified here, and I quote, we wanted to do too much, and we erred, and we created distrust within the population. As of which moment, witness, did you get the impression that you were mistaken? When you were at Tram Kok, did you already have the impression that you were going down the wrong way, and that finally you had generated the distrust of the population?
This is a personal matter, and allow me to expand on that. After the coup d'etat, the king father went into the Maki forest, and all the about 100 teachers followed. there were in fact 105 teachers left, and they fled from Tramco district to the forest. And their intention was to fight in order to get the king father back into the government, and they were in this front movement. And if you followed the movement, you knew that there was a resistant movement, and those people in the movement was alleged as Khmer Rouge, and it happened in Kampot province, in Battambang province, and particularly in Samlot, and in Prosot district in Prevang and Svay Rieng. As for Kampot and Takai provinces, it happened in Tramco district. So throughout the country at that time, the people who attended or who joined the resistance movement, they fled through the mountainous areas or to stay at the mountain. So later on, they moved down from the top of the mountains to the rural areas. At that time, the party made a declaration that the front would be organized and it would be led by the king father, Sihanouk. And there were Khieu Sampon, Hu Nam, and Hu Jun. And I participated in the movement in order to demand the return of Sihanouk. So after the front had been organized, the people returned from the forest. And when I talked about the distrust, I talked about the people who were already in the rural area, that is already in the front movement, and those who returned from the forest. And it seems that those people who returned from the forest did not really have a full confidence or trust in the people in the country. And we had to defend and protect the revolution, and we had to be always vigilant in doing so. And through such movement, then people joined, and we worked hand in hand. Although they shared responsibility at various levels. For instance, at the commune or at the district levels. And of course, people would come to you to seek your assistance or intervention.
Please forgive me for interrupting you, witness. I understand, of course, that you want to put everything back in context, but unfortunately my time is very limited. I simply wanted to know if back then, when you were at Tramco, and when you were supervising the working units, the issues of food and of lodging gave you the impression that you went down the wrong path. That is to say that the principles that you stuck by were not working. Did you think about that back then, or did I not interpret right what you said at the beginning of the hearing?
In fact, I probably made a rather lengthy response, and maybe not to the point that you want me to answer. I cannot recall the main point that you asked in your question. Could you please repeat the points that you want me to respond? President interrupt and counsel. Could you please repeat your question as the witness cannot recall it?
Bien sûr.
Certainly, Mr. President. My question, witness, was you said during the first day you testified here, and I quote, "We wanted to do too much, and we went down the wrong path. We set up distrust within the population." So I wanted to know, that's my question, if in 1975 and 1976 and at the beginning of 1977 when you were at Tram Kok, if you already had the impression that you had gone down the wrong path. Did you have the impression that the policies that you were implementing and that you explained to us this morning, that it's to say division of labor in units, collectivization, did you already have the impression, therefore, back then that these principles would not work?
At that time, the people were content with the front lines, and they simply followed it. Of course, there were a few exceptions, and we had to resolve the matters through mass meetings. And that's how we resolve the issues. However, the issues that happened were minor. For instance, 95% of the people would agree through our lines, and only 5% oppose or not agreed to. And then through the mass meetings, we explained to the people that we were moving forward and everybody would follow, and only a few would oppose, and then we would advise them to refashion themselves and to follow the lines of the front. And we would ask them to draw experience from what we did, so from what we had done so far at the time.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. I have two last questions for you. Earlier on, you said to us in your testimony when you were speaking about the working conditions and about the organization of the units that you would report to the leaders and to try to understand with them where their problems lay. And I wanted to know what kind of reports you would make to the leaders, and if you at times you would mention in these reports information, erroneous information, in order not to alert them about the situation in the units.
The report was about the leadership situation, about the situation of the enemy, and the situation of conflicts and the resolutions to those conflicts, and whether other conflicts remained unresolved. So mainly the report focused on the situations, including those areas that I mentioned, and also on the situation of the economics, on the harvest of produce, and on the collection of tar from the rubber plantation. And then the report was sent to the upper level. Usually the report would contain the situations and the measures taken, and the focus would be on the measures that what we were planning to do in the future. For example, what would be our measure on rice production, on the plantation of potatoes, and on the resolutions to the conflicts. And if the conflicts could not be resolved, then the matter would be referred to the upper echelon for their resolutions. But it did not. It rarely happened that we referred the conflicts to the upper echelon as they were busy with their affairs. They were busier than us because we had to resolve whatever happened at our level through our best ability. And only later we could seek advice from the upper level through complex situations or issues. And that is all.
Thank you. My last question, you were speaking about the difficult situations. Can you give us an example of a situation that warranted that you would report about it to the higher echelon?
It is rather difficult to respond to that. Usually the report could not contain everything. We would encompass into the report as much as we could about the situations internally and externally, and about the situation of the people in the area, and whether the people followed our movement, our guidelines or instructions, and how many percentage of them disagreed or not wanting to follow us. For example, 30% of the population did not want to follow us. This is just an example, and the same approach was used for other situations, including the situation on the economics or the situation on the work plan, so that the upper echelon could have an overview of what happened in the area. And if we needed advice from the upper echelon, we would state so in the report.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. I believe that my time is up, Mr. President. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Witness, for having answered my questions.
President, thank you. The time is convenient for a short break. We take a break now and return at 25 to 11. And court officer, please assist the witness in the room for the witnesses and civil parties during this break, and invite him, along with the duty counsel, into the courtroom at 25 to 11. The court is now in recess.